Welcome to another episode of the Speaking of Writers podcast. I'm Steve Richards. When you hear the name Emilio Pucci, you probably picture bold, swirling prints, effortless elegance, and the glamour of La Dolce Vita, worn by icons like Jackie Kennedy and Sophia Loren. But behind the color and style lies a story that reads more like a wartime thriller than a fashion biography. In Emilio Pucci, The Astonishing Odyssey of a Fashion Icon, authors Idanna Pucci, Emilio's niece, and Terence uncover the remarkable, little known life of a man who was not only a designer, but an Olympic skier, a World War II bomber pilot, a courier of critical intelligence to the Allies, and a prisoner of the Gestapo, too. Praised by the New York Times, Vogue, and Publishers Weekly, this book brings to life a complex figure set against the backdrop of Italy's darkest and most transformative years. Joining me now are the authors, Idanna and Terence. Welcome to the Speaking of Writers podcast.
Hello.
Lovely to see you.
Great to have you both here. Idanna, as Emilio Pucci's niece, you had a unique window into his life. What inspired you to finally tell his full story?
Well, what inspired me is that something happened, that my aunt, Emilio's widow, he died in 1992, was approached for a documentary. And she was quite worried. She was very happy about it, but she was quite worried about the war period because she didn't know anything really about it. And she married him in 1959 when she was 20 and he was 45. And Emilio, like many Italians, I would say almost all Italians, did not speak about the war. The whole population, the whole of Italy was plunged into this, trying to get the energy to look forward, to rebuild the country. And it was so devastated that I remember in my family, nobody spoke, you know. It's like if nothing had happened. And so she too, she didn't know much about the war. And we said, look, don't worry. Terry and I love to do research, and we are actually very passionate researchers. This is the way to learn things. And so we will do it. And we started almost immediately. And very soon we realized that we were in a labyrinth of new information, somehow quite astonishing. But of course, we didn't think of a book at all. We were just, and then, suddenly the documentary, like many films, was discontinued, wasn't made. And we remained with all this material, very interesting, and we just went on. We went on, and still we didn't think about the book. We went on for ourselves. We would share things with my aunt, who was quite astonished. That's why the name Astonishing, and in the title. And then suddenly something happened. We found a self-published book in the New York Library that was about that period. And in the bibliography, we saw this tiny writing that said the report of Marchese Emilio Pucci in his role in connection with the Ciano diaries. And we knew that Ciano was the foreign minister of Italy of Mussolini, and also his son-in-law. He had married Edda, the daughter of Mussolini.
And then I discovered that in the New York Times in 1943, this was cited, these Ciano diaries were cited as the most important documents of the Second World War. And at that point, we knew that there was something quite quite symbolic, quite huge, and quite dangerous behind what we were plunging into. And through a miracle, and it's written in the book, described in the book, we were able to find this report. And that was a real plunging into the labyrinth. It took quite a bit of time. But this report had been classified by the CIA as top secret and only declassified after his death. So he never even was able to see the report he had written for the spy chief based in Bern, Switzerland, called Alan Dulles, who later would run the CIA. And in doing this, we saw and could read Emilio's own words. We could read him describing his role. And at that point, Steve, we realized that that could actually be the structure of the book, that his voice telling you today what he was going through, very fresh. He wrote it in 1945, just when the war had ended. And he had been requested by Dulles to write this for the CIA, then this, what would be the CIA, they were called OSS then.
Because
Right.
at the time, he was interned in Switzerland. And he, even if the war had ended, he couldn't come back. And that's why he wrote this diary.
Well, this
about
report.
This report. It's about almost 60 pages long. And he wrote it because Dulles said, if you write a report of your, of your life during the war, then I will give you a letter and you will be able to go back to Italy, show that you did something fantastic for the Allies. He wrote the report. He gave it to the office of Dulles because Dulles had already gone back to America, and he never received the letter. And he never received anything. And the book is not only an incredible, just finding this report is a book in itself, but also how Dulles behaved after the war towards Emilio Pucci.
So let me frame something. The readers should just know this is a titillating moment where they should know that Hitler was searching for these diaries. All the SS in Italy were searching for Emilio. They also, Mussolini had his people and all the secrets searching for Emilio. Emilio was running for his life with a price on his head, dead or alive. And he ultimately, after helping the diaries get across the border into Switzerland so they could get into the Allied hands, he was then captured and tortured by the Gestapo, his head broken in 3 places, cracked his skull. And the point is that these diaries were so important, they were used at Nuremberg. These were the accounts of Mussolini and Hitler in the same room, talking their completely mad, completely jealous rivalries, and they were used at Nuremberg to convict all those war criminals. So Emilio sacrificed himself to pass this on. He fought for a much bigger cause than himself. No one knows this story, Steve.
But also these diaries, the fact they were used in Nuremberg, they became the foundation of international law. Exactly. This is really important.
Exactly, because you see what they did is the diaries, of course, were throughout the war. So it was very clear when Ciano, the foreign minister of Mussolini, wrote these accounts well before the war began. The Germans were already, the Ribbentrop was already telling him that we need to go to war. We will go to war. And that removed the ability of any German officer to say, I was just following orders. This was a planned war, and that is the basis of international war crimes, if the war is planned. So Emilios really sacrificed himself and almost died, God, 3, 4, 5 times. to give that to the Americans so the world could know that Italy had been pulled into this war by a lunatic. And
the way he smuggled the diaries to, it's important because he smuggled them by bringing Edda Mussolini, the daughter of Mussolini and wife of Ciano, who in the meantime was being executed as a traitor. So it's a Greek tragedy, this, and he managed to bring her, smuggle her with the diaries into Switzerland, because Ciano, in his last wish, he said, please, please bring the diaries to the Allies. The Allies have to have these.
And Ciano was very pro-American, very pro-British, as were many Italians. The vast majority didn't want this war. And so that became very clear. And this becomes part of the remaking of Italy. What you were saying, one of the brightest moments is the Dolce Vita, this kind of rebirth. And Emilio finds himself after the war, as does Italy, destroyed, damaged, and yet this rebirth takes place. From the ashes, this phoenix rises. Emilio plays a part of it, but there's also in film with De Sica, Rossellini, Sophia Loren, Gina Lollobrigida, all Cleopatra, Ben-Hur. There's the Hollywood on the Tiber in Rome. And that is the world that everybody loves, the Italy everybody loves. And it had to happen when the strongman falls, those flowers can bloom. And that's one of the messages in the book.
The Museum of Modern Art had the first exhibition of Italian, at that time, contemporary art, music, volare.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
And people ask us, I mean, last night we had this big event in San Francisco, and with 200 people absolutely riveted, because nobody knows the other side of the face of this man, and they all ask, but how did he pass from that, all that pain, suffering, struggle, because he represents, as a young man, many Italian like him who went through terrible, terrible things. How can he pass from that to these colors, this explosion of colors, this great genius that he had for design? And he didn't even know he could design. He could sketch, But that is the miracle of life and human beings, And it's a question of character also. If you are extremely positive and you don't play the victim and you don't lament, but you have this incredible zest for life and for joy, because he gave joy with his colors after the war. It's what people needed, Then, he had the art, because I find it an art like playing music, is where he always placed himself where luck could strike, which is a great, it's a gift. So, yeah, this is what is important.
I want to go back to Emilio's time as a Gestapo prisoner. How do you think that shaped the man he later became?
Well, he describes, it's actually really, really interesting, that part, First of all, he never complains, but he said that the most terrible thing in torture is not so much the physical pain. You somehow go beyond it, It is that because you faint and then you come back, you lose consciousness, the real pain is the terror of having spoken. And of course, they wanted to know where the diaries were, and he knew where they were. And this is something that we never think about, is this element of revealing what they want. And the only way he would find out that he hadn't spoken is when he would be dragged again in every day. They kept a log. That he could understand in German, because when he was a teenager, he was sent for a summer school in Germany. Not in Germany, in Austria. So he could understand German, and he could see that he hadn't spoken, There was a log of...
Yeah, he could see on the table that nothing had been written.
Yeah.
And so it's this also self-pride of not breaking down, of standing up, you see, and protecting your friends, protecting those who were at risk. So perhaps.
And it made me think of all those who are tortured today. He had all sorts of forms of torture, including the
waterboarding.
Waterboarding, yeah.
Yeah, and it made me think of all these people who are being tortured today, or even after Afghanistan, those in Guantanamo, still in Guantanamo. And it made me think that probably that is the greatest fear, is to say something they shouldn't say.
This book vividly captures Florence, Firenze, and Capri. How important were these places in shaping Pucci's identity and aesthetic, too?
Well, Florence, of course, was very, very important, because he was born in Naples, which is another gear, If you're born in Naples, you really, even today, if you have Napolitan blood, you are one step further, And because these people,
yes.
Yeah, because these people have undergone so many invasions, so many different rulers in history.
So much suffering.
And so much suffering that they really have they have something that they survive,
A joy of life that's almost inexplicable.
Yes.
And they're the envy of everyone in Italy.
Imagination.
Their imagination, their music, their creativity. Yeah. Perhaps that also answers your previous question. Because he went through all that.
Yeah.
Then his impulse to create joy, to share alegria, light with the world.
His mother was from Naples, you see.
And Capri is just next to Naples.
Yeah. So Florence, on the other hand, was, made the fortune. It was the richest city in Europe, in the known world, in the 15th century. Through textiles, because they had what made Florence so rich. It was they had innovators. They were innovators, and they invented the art, the science, I would say, of softening wool, the technique of softening wool. So all these, before then, people wore these rough wool, rough wool, and they would, and from England, from the north, from everywhere, these cargoes of rough wool would arrive in Florence by boat, and then by cart. They would be carted from Pisa to Florence along the Arno. It had to be along the Arno, because the softening wool implies wheels,
water
wheels, and water,
with huge mallets smashing down on the wool. Each time it's hit, it shrinks a little bit more, softens a little bit more. And that is what they sold all over Europe, and it became the richest city in Europe. But what Emilio always called himself was un artigiano fiorentino. I'm a Florentine artisan. It was the artisan guilds that built the city. and made the money. And so in a way that holds him. And then the spontaneous creativity and colors of Capri also helped inform him. You put those two together and you have the inspiration, you have the artisan technique and the ability to create these works, and then the colors all come crashing.
One little detail, because people tend to idolize, oh, Florence in the Renaissance and all that. And it shouldn't be, because at the time, Florence was the hell on earth to live there, because it was the noisiest city in the known Western world, because it had these
Water
wheels every 50 yards along the Arno. So where you have the Ponte Vecchio, where you have all the beauty, no, there were these water wheels day and night, and people had to live with that.
Pounding down like
that
metronome.
That
Huge
noise.
metronomes.
Yeah.
And once they had a flood in I believe it was in the 1300s, they moved them outside the city walls. But before they were within the city
No,
walls.
much later they moved them. Much later.
They moved them upriver.
Yeah, upriver. There's only one left, just for, and it's abandoned, But also they learned the art of dyeing silk.
Yeah.
So again, it's textiles.
Yeah.
And he grew up in the city of, artisans working with these textiles, and then it became very sophisticated.
And then those hot southern colors that you see in the bright limes, the lemons, the oranges, the tangerines, all of those colors in the aquamarine waters all come crashing into his designs.
Yeah. This is a story.
Sorry, I was just going to say, for 20 years, Italians had only worn black, dark blue, and gray.
I mean, the common people.
The common people.
Because
and then it exploded.
The elite always, manages somehow.
Yeah.
This is a story of reinvention, resilience, and creativity, too. What do you hope readers take away from Pucci's journey?
Well, I'm more interested in young people, in the future generation. I really hope young people get to read this book. They will find it exciting. They will not find it boring, and because it's the secret of survival. It's this: how do you attain resilience in your character? Curiosity is a must. Curiosity is a must. So leave your little telephone on the side sometimes, because whatever you see in this telephone has been thought by somebody else, has been invented by somebody else, has been discovered by somebody else. So you just receive it. You are a passive recipient. But if you start thinking by yourself, then you may become curious and become more knowledgeable through yourself, your efforts, and that is a saving grace. So I hope somehow that young people can get inspired a little bit in taking Emilio as a role model for their lives. This is what I would love,
And in that, the resilience that you were talking about, Steve, is that if there are blocks in front of you and walls in front of you, walk around it. If there are impediments, persevere. To realize that life isn't an easy road. To be aware that all of these are going to rise up in front of you, but to persevere, to believe in oneself, to keep those values and to be that, keep that curiosity guiding you always.
And also, when I spoke about young people, now let me talk about adults and older people. We, in the same way that we learned so much in doing this research, the same way, because you think, oh, I've studied World War II in school. I don't know here, but certainly in Europe, there was in history, when history was taught. And then you say, well, I know. And instead, we learned so much. And in these presentations we do, people tell us, but I didn't know this. I've discovered this. I didn't know about the World War II. So we really hope that adults and older people find some things that they don't know. They learn something.
And as Mark Twain once said, history may not repeat itself with strong men, etc., but it sure can rhyme. And I think you may have noticed that there are similarities between, say, Mussolini and what's happening in our country now. And when things get dark, there's always the hope that light can come crashing through. And that, I think, is also a huge takeaway from the book, is that light can crash through, and that those creative voices can find a way. And that's exactly what happened in Italy after the war.
We had a very interesting moderator in New York at the Casa Italiano of NYU. It was really packed. There were 300 people everywhere standing and all that. And we were very lucky because we had a wonderful woman called Ruth Ben-Ghiat, Ghiat. And she's an expert on that, on fascism. And she is also has researched and studied the psychology and behavior of dictators in history. And at a certain moment, there are traits. There are traits that are common to all. For us, it was really, really interesting.
Yeah.
One trait, for instance, is the son-in-law. So nowadays, for instance, Mussolini's son-in-law, very important. Today we know Orban in Hungary, the son-in-law, Erdogan in Turkey, the son-in-law, and Mussolini, and on, it's a trait, because the son-in-law follows orders, is loyal, but at the same time may be disposable.
Yeah.
You see?
Yeah.
So that's why Chano was executed.
Yeah. So stay tuned for that.
Yeah.
But
and there are other traits.
But what Ruth also shared is these similarities between past and present. And the audience was riveted because sometimes when we live in the United States of amnesia, we forget that people have gone through this before, that we have seen these moments before. And that's why I was mentioning about also keeping that resilience of knowing that there will be light that will come crashing through.
Always.
And this story, with also the rise of Italy, this phoenix rising out of the ashes, Emilio plays a part in that. But the whole Italy that everyone loves, Steve, that you well know, they love the period after the war, not what happened before. And we have people in Washington now that are absolutely following the same game plan that Mussolini followed.
But also, you see, Terry, is very difficult in this country because they've never experienced it.
Right.
They've never experienced it. And so it's very difficult to recognize it. And you need people who have studied and who have scrutinized different periods of history. In Europe is different. We had Napoleon, we had so many. We had even the Medicis in Florence.
Right.
The Medicis arrived, and this is something that not many people know, 150 years after Florence, all the monuments, the beautiful monuments that people come to admire, were already built. So they arrived in it was done. What they did was sponsor artists to make it even, for themselves, really. And they were, the first Medicis were intellectual despots, but very, very incredibly intellectual, and yet they were, woodcutters, in the countryside. And the second part, they were just dictators,
But they get all the credit for building the beautiful Florence everyone sees, when in fact it was the artisans.
Yeah. And then, of course, we've had, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the Ottomans, the Russian, the Tsars, and then the Soviet Union, of course. And here nobody has experienced
anything like that. No.
Yeah, some say it's our turn.
Yeah.
But
well, this book reads like a spy novel. Emilio Pucci, The Astonishing Odyssey of a Fashion Icon. Fascinating blend of history, espionage, resilience, and creativity, revealing the extraordinary life behind one of fashion's most recognizable names. Idanna Pucci, Terence Ward, thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
This was great. And thank you for watching and for listening. Make sure you like it, share it, subscribe to it. This is the Speaking of Writers podcast. I'm Steve Richards. Thanks for watching.